All right, now we are going to do this one here. So this one, we are using alcohol inks and Yupo as our surface. And then I ended up putting some die cuts in front of it. Now, one of the alcohol inks we're going to be using is the Rose Alloy, which is like a leafing metallic. I didn't have any rose gold cardstock, so an easy way to make that is take a scrap of my Yupo and I added my peachy color as well as that Rose Alloy just to create some cardstock in order to be able to have a piece there that matched to die cut with. So I'm going to take my paste here. I'm going to tape my Yupo down. You could attempt to do this with glossy cardstock, which is another surface that people use regularly with alcohol inks. The only issue with the glossy cardstock is Yupo is non-porous. Glossy cardstock is porous, but it's clay coated, so it has a shiny finish to it. But the alcohol ink, while you can use both surfaces with alcohol ink, it absorbs differently on the glossy cardstock. So you would end up having just a little bit of a different look in this, but it could look really, really cool too. I like using my Yupo because it tends to be a little bit more forgiving. If I'm not super happy with how something looks, if it's too dark or whatever, I can add a little bit more blending solution. I can lighten it, I can rehydrate it, move it. Whereas cardstock, the glossy cardstock, sometimes once you've put a piece or alcohol ink in place, you're kind of stuck with it. You can't really start moving it around. You can lighten it a little bit, but you can't start moving it. So I'm going to put this in my dish of water here so that it stays wet. And this needs to completely dry before we go on to the next step. But I happen to have one here that is already dry. Let's clear our surface off first. Now the mat that I'm using, it's actually a mat for baking. I ended up getting them in a 3-pack at Costco, and I just use one for crafts because it's a perfect surface. Nice and light, but nice and easy to wipe off. But one thing to consider is if you're using a lighter mat, the alcohol inks will stain it. So I typically use my glass mat here, and there's a white mat that goes with this. The alcohol inks will stain it, so you want to be aware of whatever surface you're using. If it's a lighter one and you don't want it stained, maybe don't use that surface. But for cleaning this up, once I'm done, any alcohol ink that has gone on the surface here, I can use some isopropyl alcohol and just wipe it up. So it's very forgiving that way, and it's dark so you don't see any staining. The alloys need to be mixed up before they're used. You can hear the ball in there. If you can't hear the ball, that means it's stuck in the pigment or the micas or whatever it is that makes them metallic. So you need to make sure to shake it until you can hear that. Also needs to be done with blending solution. I'll regularly use my alcohol inks with isopropyl alcohol, but the alloys need the blending solution in order to work properly. They don't react properly without it. So first thing I'm going to do is put some blending solution down. The other thing with the alloys to keep in mind is less is more. So it's much easier to add more on if you don't think you have enough. If you have too much, the only way to get rid of it really is to kind of push it off the surface. So I'm getting a little bit of each of my colors down. I'm just going to use my blower tool. I'm just going to get some around first, and then I will add my alloy. And I want to make sure that I get a little bit in here as well. I can see where I've missed putting some blending solution down. I'm putting tiny drops of the alloy, and then I'm going to add an alcohol ink on top of it. I find that that helps it to move around a little bit. And when I chose colors for this, I kind of tried to choose a sky, a greenery, and a flower, but they go all over the place. They don't just stay in one place. So I wouldn't worry too much about making sure that you have a sky color. You just want to make sure you have colors that look pretty together. You're going to move it around until you like how it looks, and I actually pretty much like how it looks right now. I want to make sure to get rid of that big blank spot there, and I wanted to break up that rose gold there. Oh, another little white dot there. You could leave those white spots there if you like them. If you don't like them, break them up. There you go. Once you have how it looks, just leave it to dry. Alcohol inks dry fairly quickly. I want to say in a matter of minutes. It really depends on how liberal you were with the blending solution, but they dry fairly quickly. So once that's completely dry, the only other thing that I did was I put that onto my card back. I die cut my flowers and just glued them right onto the surface, and then added my sentiment. So another super simple card, but it seemed to need something else. Just this texture, it just seemed like it was missing something. I could have just put just a sentiment on there. So if that's what you like, you absolutely can do that. But I just felt that some flowers on there would look really pretty as well. We'll see you in the last video, the last technique.